Hello and a very warm welcome to the late breaking F1 podcast presented by Harry Eade and me, Ben Hocking. Bahrain Grand Prix review, first review of the season. All 20 drivers finishing the race, but none of the 19 able to do anything about Max Verstappen taking victory, first race of the year ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez, Red Bull 1-2, with Carlos Sainz joining them on the podium. And I am glad that Harry is back. You left me by myself yesterday. I didn't know what I was doing.
Oh, mate, you smashed it. I listened to that on the way home this morning. You nailed it.
You?
Yeah. You nailed it. Way better. I just sat and listened to it. I was like, I couldn't do this. I couldn't do 37 minutes on my own. It would be chaos. So no, you did very well. Well done, Ben. And I'm back now. And Sam will be back next week.
Exactly. We'll be reunited as a three, at least temporarily. Again, our greatest attendance was in January this year. Sure, very late breaking indeed. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the Bahrain GP. And as mentioned, Max Verstappen taking a very dominant win, 22 seconds at the flag, which is pretty ominous given that is about 10 seconds or so clear of where he finished at the end of last year's Bahrain GP. And if you remember, that's 2023. From there, it went pretty well for Verstappen. So the omens are good if you are the Red Bull driver. Harry, is it possible that Red Bull might be faster than they were last year, at least at the end of last year?
I was quite buoyed by qualifying yesterday. I thought, with my sort of prediction to the start before the season of they'll still be ahead, but it'll be closer. After qualifying, Max was only two or three dents ahead, and Perez was, but deep in the top 10. But yeah, no, their race pace. Oh no,
no chance.
Yeah. That's a bit depressing. I mean, Max is more than Perez, but I guess Perez, again, a similar story to last year, and they had to fight his way back a bit, and Sainz stuck with him. But it did seem like he had Sainz covered for for the rest of the race. But yeah, Verstappen's race pace, blimey. I think it could have been way more than 22 seconds if he wanted it to be, which is probably the more worrying point. Yeah. It's quite ominous, and he looked like I look more worn out just after I've woken up than he did after that race. He was just so chilled. He's like, yeah, really great day. Car was great. I'm great. The world's great. He was just not bothered or not fussed. So yeah, it's possible. I don't know, but Bahrain for them last year was fairly dominant as well. It was a similar story. I know the P3 was different this year, but yeah, maybe we can take some solace in that. I don't know, because last year was just them winning all the time. But yeah, this was fairly ominous. And whether that car is just better at race pace now than it is in qualifying, that's going to be, if it carries on, that's going to be a long old season. But I will remain positive and say, because there were some positives from other cars this weekend, other teams. But yeah, they've come up the blocks strong. That's fair to say.
That is an understatement and a half, but you are absolutely correct. And I feel like the only people within the Red Bull circle that might be disappointed with how today went is anyone that has anything to do with sponsorship, because a car is very good when you only see them about twice a race. So the sponsors might be unhappy because if today's anything to go by, they aren't going to get a lot of attention all year, excluding qualifying. There were multiple times where the camera just after 15 laps or so remembered Verstappen was there, but of course there was nothing to show of him because of how great a job he was doing out front. And obviously it's very car dependent as well, but again, he was 22 seconds clear of his teammates, so that is evidence of what a great job he did. Yeah, this is very worrying for literally everyone else, because you're right, qualifying wise it was far closer, but again, second half of last year it was fairly close in terms of qualifying anyway. But even in some of the later Grand Prix of 2023, if we're thinking about Las Vegas is probably a good example, right? I appreciate the 2 seconds are very different, but even though Leclerc didn't take the win, he was in contention for a good chunk of that Grand Prix. Here, it felt like a lap and a half, and that was it. And you were never going to see Verstappen again. And your point about how it was 22 seconds and it felt like it could have been more, I think is absolutely spot on, in that, they only used one set of hard tyre. The hard tyres were the preferred tyre out there by a long way, to the point where the mediums, as far as I'm aware, were not used by anyone. The hard tyre was the preferred race tyre, and yet Red Bull only had one set of them compared to everyone else who had two. So in theory, if they had two, I feel like that would have added a few more seconds onto it. And also the first stint on the soft compound tyre, I think Verstappen was out there just as long as anyone else because he could be. Like, there was no threat of an undercut, to the point where I don't think he pulled off the optimal race strategy. If it was the optimal race strategy, he probably would have come in at the same time as the likes of his teammate and the Ferraris. Instead, he was like, well, might as well just stay out here. There's literally no reason not to. So yeah, if he wanted this to be 30 seconds, it would have been 30 seconds. I'm very confident in saying that. And I appreciate he was on the soft tyre for that last stint, but when he set that fastest lap late on, I think it was about 1.4 seconds clear of the existing fastest lap at that point. Good news is Pedro de la Rosa's record safe.
About to say the same thing. Yeah. Swings and roundabouts. You got to look at the light of the horizon. Pedro de la Rosa's record is safe for another year. Oh God.
Anyway, we'll see how that carries on into the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, of course. But a very good start to the season for Max Verstappen. Again, massive understatement. But from Sergio Perez's perspective, as you say, he had a bit more work to do starting from 5th place. But he seemed to get on with it without much fuss at all. It wasn't very long until he found himself into P2.
Yeah. Again, a story of his year last year, but if the qualifying had been better, I think maybe he could have been P2 to start with. But it probably would have been the same result anyway. You're right. He just sort of, got on with it. Just picked them off one at a time. And the strategy worked well for him as well. But yeah, that car was good enough that I think they could do what they wanted. But yeah, no, it was a good drive from Perez, and I was thinking this when we were watching the RBs, the Manarbis, battling at the end, and Ricciardo obviously got let in front of Tsunoda, and I was thinking that wouldn't be enough to get the seat next year, and I was like, well, the Red Bull seat next year, sorry, but look at the Perez performance. That's exactly, if he just does that every race, why would they ever get rid of him? So from his, I know that's obviously not his overall aim, but in terms of keeping a drive for 2025. Just keep doing that, mate. You'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, why on earth would they go in a different direction? Particularly, if one of Yuki Tsunoda or Daniel Ricciardo is able to offer more throughout this season, then that's one thing, and we'll get on to those two drivers a little bit later on in the show. But whilst they're fighting for 12th place outside of the points, nothing on offer, and Sergio Perez is able to potentially just keep on picking up podiums like he did there, 2nd place. That's a good step forward from where he was in the second half of last year. That he wasn't doing that on a regular basis. That was often the McLarens. It was often Charles Leclerc picking up 2nd place. So if he can continue that regular consistency, that is a statement that Red Bull will listen to. And I think there's every chance that they do continue on with him. I was quite impressed with the way that Perez was able to, I don't want to say cut his way through the field, because it was only a couple of positions he needed to make up. But equally, the move on Russell, I thought, was quite an impressive one, because it was very clean. It was very decisive. There wasn't a lot of fanfare. Occasionally, one of the complaints I have about Perez when he's forced to come back through the field is that he sometimes gets his level of aggression wrong. Like, there are times I feel he goes too far, and I think there are times where he's stuck behind a car for too many laps. Here, it felt like he had what first opportunity he had, and he telegraphed the move exactly, didn't he? Like, he knew Russell was going to defend the inside into turn 4, so he knew exactly what he was going to do as a result of that. And it was close racing, but also it felt fairly comfortable. So he didn't waste any time in getting it done. I was quite impressed by his performance.
Well done, Checo.
Nicely done. The Ferrari duo, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, finishing third and fourth. Oh, hang on a minute. I'm just hearing Leclerc has locked up again. He has just sat down, but he is locked up again. He managed to get fourth. He was nearly fifth, but he got Russell in the end for fourth place. What do you make of Ferrari? Do you think that they should be buoyed by the fact that they seem to be clear of Merc, McLaren, and Aston Martin, or a bit disappointed that Red Bull are still a long way down the road?
Yeah, mixed bag for Ferrari. Red Bull clearly a long way down the road, although, as Sainz mentioned in his post-race interview, Perez was in sight, at least, for him. And I think if Leclerc had remembered how to drive his car for the first half of the race, he probably would have been in that mix anyway, because his pace in the second half was excellent, but the first bit was terrible. I think he is still searching for the apex of turn 10. He's not found it yet.
Goodness me.
But he will find it.
That runoff has never seen so much action.
I mean, to be fair, it wasn't just him. No one wanted to do that corner today. Yeah. Very odd. I know it's a tricky corner, but we've never seen that so often in a race. Very strange.
I like the Mercs using it. So, like, Russell was just deciding, I'm going to race down that part of the racetrack, or not the racetrack, and Hamilton deciding, I'm going to go off, therefore I'm just not going to move the steering wheel.
Yeah, I'm going off anyway, so you might as well just commit to it. But yeah, so I think Leclerc could have been in that mix too. So I guess I'll be buoyed in that they're definitely, at least today, the second best. But Leclerc's initial race pace was absolute garbage. And I was like, oh God, it's classic Ferrari. And it was only really until Sainz started to pick people off that it was more encouraging for them again, because he did have genuine race pace the whole way. So they will be buoyed by that. But yeah, a mixed bag, because there's still at least one Red Bull is way up the road compared to them.
I love what I saw from Carlos Sainz today. I really felt it was a bit of a point to prove Grand Prix for him. Like, we know obviously what's happened with his seat over the winter period, and we know he is essentially advertising himself throughout the rest of this year for a seat somewhere else. It felt authoritative what he was able to do. Obviously in qualifying he came up a little bit short on Leclerc. It was about a tenth of a second, but he was quick throughout all three sessions. And then from the off, it just felt like he was on it. And if he keeps that up throughout this season, then he can only do himself well in that process of finding another team. Leclerc, you're right. It was bizarre just how often he was locking up. The worst one was when he was essentially getting past and he was locking up. It's like Martin Brundle, I think, made this observation on Sky Sports commentary of, you're not the driver late braking into a corner trying to get a move done. You're the one who's trying to shape yourself up right for the next couple of corners, and you're still locking up. There was clearly an issue there. It's almost a bit of a shock that he didn't lose more positions than what he did. You're right, though. It came back to him. So the second half of the race was certainly more encouraging than the first half, but I can't remember what the distance between Sainz and Leclerc was at the flag, about 10 seconds or so, something along those lines. But yeah, you're right. It's a mixed bag. It's one of those where if you'd said pre-season to them, you're going to be clear of McLaren, Mercedes, and Aston Martin, they'd say, yeah, all right, we'll take that. Oh, by the way, but you'll also be this far behind Max Verstappen. They'd probably go, I'm not so sure anymore. Because, whilst Perez was in sight, Verstappen definitely wasn't. They do seem to have something to work with, though.
Yeah, a good basis. And again, the race pace of Sainz was where they've struggled last year was race pace. And again, I know Leclerc struggled in the first part, but Sainz was encouraging enough, I think, for them to be buoyed by that.
Yeah, it's difficult to know, I guess, with the second half, whether, I don't know, the Sainz versus Perez battle, it's difficult to know how much that was soft tyre versus hard tyre. You could argue, we'll talk about the Minardi duo of Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda a little bit later on, but they were soft tyre versus hard tyre, and actually Ricciardo was the one who was attacking Tsunoda towards the end of the Grand Prix. So maybe the soft tyre and the hard tyre were working at a similar level, in which case that would be quite encouraging that Sainz was essentially matching his pace throughout that stage of the Grand Prix. But yeah, this is one where this is the first chapter and we'll just have to see how the other ones unfold. Should we just get this out of the way of now, actually?
Oh, God.
Bold predictions. Should we just see those off now? Because it's not a good start.
Oh, okay. Go on then.
So you, not only weren't you here, you decided, you know what, to try and get a point, I'm still going to send in my bold prediction. And you'll be glad to know it was worth absolutely nothing because Max Verstappen did win the Grand Prix. Your bold prediction was that he wouldn't. Yep. And that was a fairly big margin. So I'm going to call that one wrong.
I was quite wrong. It was again, after yesterday, I was like, I don't know. Could be on here. But after lap 3, I was like, not on anymore. Not happening.
Yeah. Sam, who isn't here today, made the criminal mistake of copying what you did, and he's therefore also wrong. I mean, mine wasn't that far off, weirdly. I said that Haas were going to score a point, and Magnussen did finish 12th, and we'll talk about Haas a little bit more later on, but I'm okay with that. Like, as far as being wrong is concerned, I'm towards the right end of being wrong.
I'm the least wrong. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Mercedes and McLaren ended up in something of a Merc McLaren by the end of it. 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th went Russell, Norris, Hamilton, Piastri. So of those 4, Russell had the best starting position. He was 6 positions clear of Lewis Hamilton, who was in 9th, the lowest qualifier of that pack. But by the end, they were all separated by only a few seconds. What did you make of both of those teams? Are you surprised that Mercedes weren't a little bit more competitive? Were they roughly where you thought they were going to be?
Yeah, I guess Russell's race was the opposite of Leclerc's in that he started off really well. It seemed pretty racy at the start, and then it all tailed off. I know they were dealing with some issues as well in terms of like battery power management and stuff like that, but. Yeah, maybe Russell flattered to deceive. Is that a phrase?
Spot on.
Oh, nailed it.
You haven't made it up.
That's great news. I think it's qualifying performance flattered to deceive, in that it didn't quite deserve to be P3 on the grid. But fair play. He put it there, and yeah, because where Hamilton ended up was very roughly where he started. And maybe that was the true pace of that car, because obviously Russell then fell back to that position anyway, or towards that position anyway. So, yeah, strange one to dissect. Hamilton didn't really look that on it for most of it. He wasn't really anywhere, was he? I know he closing up towards the McLaren at the end, but he wasn't really in that fight for most of the race. But yeah, so and then there's McLaren who, look, it's not 17th in a DNF. So they can be happy about that.
Correct.
But given where they were at the end of last year, maybe they'd be slightly disappointed as to where that pace was today. It was fine. Like it was just fine. They were clear of the Aston Martin, which I know we'll get on to, and obviously equal / around where Mercedes were. But it's kind of not really moved anywhere for Maka. But it's definitely the most positive start they've had for a long time. So I'm sure they'll still be happy with how that went. But yeah, if it remains like that, then it's going to be a tight battle between those two teams for the rest of the year. And actually, that could be quite an interesting one to watch, because Norris versus Piastri versus Russell versus Hamilton, that's pretty good. It's pretty good to watch, I reckon.
Yeah, I can subscribe to that. That's all right.
Nice.
Yeah, I feel like with the way that the Grand Prix went today, because it was, I guess, a slightly unusual race in that all 20 cars finished, which for a first race of the year is a bit mad. Like, imagine saying that 20 years ago, that in a first race of the season, 20 out of 20 cars would finish. Used to be the case where you'd only have like between 6 and 8, but now it's just such bulletproof reliability in Formula One that even though there were some issues that you referenced out there, everyone quite comfortably was able to finish. Even though the Alfa Romeo, Stake, Sauber guys did try their best to make sure Valtteri Bottas didn't make it to the checkered flag. But outside of that, everyone seemed relatively comfortable. And also 0 VSCs, 0 safety cars, not usually the case at Bahrain. What I mean to say by all this is actually there was a real representation of what the race pace was up and down the field. I feel like, roughly speaking, the finishing positions, definitely in the top 10, were reflective of where the teams were. It's not like we had a jumbled up grid or a jumbled up finishing order because of some late race safety car. Every team had the opportunity to show their true pace over the 57 laps. And ultimately, Mercedes and McLaren seem incredibly level. I feel like from both of their perspectives, they'll be okay, but not massively overjoyed by what happened. Mercedes are an odd one in that earlier in the weekend, it felt a bit more optimistic. When Lewis Hamilton was fastest in FP2, and I know it's only practice, but it is a good session to determine race pace FP2. It felt more encouraging from Merck's side, and it just hasn't quite carried through. Even so, that they might be happy that they have a concept that they believe in a bit more and can work with, and they're not starting from being the 5th or 6th fastest team, that they do have an okay platform. But even so, based on where expectation was a couple of days ago, they might be a bit gutted. I guess the other frustrating thing for Mercedes is Russell and Hamilton went in completely different directions this weekend. So Russell went all out on qualifying. Lewis Hamilton essentially said, nah, scrap that. I'm all about race pace. And the end result, they were basically alongside each other. It's like that they went 2 different directions and there wasn't any benefit to either, which is always a bit of a shame, because if you're trying things out, you'd like one side to be conclusive for research and learning, and that wasn't the case. You're right, Russell seemed far more comfortable on the C3 tyre than he was on the C1, the soft compound. The Leclerc comparison is an interesting one because he was far better at the beginning of the race and then just seemed to drop off quite a lot. If that race was 5 laps, 10 laps longer, it wouldn't surprise me if he fell back behind Norris and maybe Hamilton as well. It felt like that was where it was going. From McLaren's perspective, versus where they were at the end of last year, it's disappointing. I still think they might be, it's still a massive step forward in terms of where they've been at Bahrain in recent years. So there is that. And again, they're not, they're in the fight. But I feel like it is a similar situation with both of those teams where they'll come away from Bahrain with the points, but going a little bit more, please.
Yeah. And maybe it'll come out of more high-speed tracks, but just given where they were at the back end of 2023, they might. And the high standards that they set themselves with their pre-season marketing campaign, maybe they will be a bit disappointed.
Another team that might be a bit disappointed is Aston Martin. So there was a little bit of uncertainty as to where the 3rd, 4th and 5th ranked teams would end up in this Grand Prix. And it does seem as if McLaren and Mercedes right now do have an edge on Aston Martin. Qualifying wise, Alonso was very much in the mix. He qualified P6, so he was right in there with those teams. But it seemed as if as soon as race pace kicked on, they didn't have that same pace those two teams did. Do you think there'll be disappointment there that race wasn't able to match quali?
Yeah, because it's like they've got the opposite problem that they had last year, which was their quali wouldn't match their race, which obviously you want both to be good, but if you're going to pick one, you go for race over qualifying because that's where the points are scored. So it was strange. It was immediate from Alonso that the pace wasn't there. You could just tell straight away. He didn't, after the start, he wasn't staying on the back of Sainz, and then Norris got him, and then Piastri got him, and then Hamilton got him. And I thought maybe it's a bit of Alonso playing the long game, but he just didn't. He wasn't really defending it too hard. But I think even that just wasn't the pace just wasn't there, and I think he knew it straight away. So his pace was interesting. Stroll, who obviously got punted by Hulkenberg at the start, that was not his fault, but had a very good race, and be intrigued to see where they probably would have ended up in similar positions, but a different time gap between them. And I think maybe Stroll comes out on top, because given that he was pointing the wrong way at turn 1, and then was ahead of Alonso with only a few laps to go with how the strategy worked out, don't know. It was maybe slightly more encouraging from that point of view. But yeah, look, they're not today. They weren't in that fight. But it's a strange one because, like you say, the 1 lap pace was very much there from Alonso yesterday. So yeah, a bit of head scratching for Aston Martin.
Yeah, where those 2 Aston Martin drivers would have ended up if the punt didn't happen at the beginning, it would have been intriguing. I tend to think that Lance Stroll, even though obviously he was massively disadvantaged by being punted, that at least forced him onto the better strategy for those sorts of midfield drivers, which was pit as early as you can and use the undercut, because Lance Stroll essentially matched the strategy that Zhou Guanyu did. And no disrespect to Zhou Guanyu, who had a fantastic race, but I don't think he was 11th on pure pace. And I think that was strategy playing into it. And I think Lance Stroll had the same sort of thing. There was such management going on in the first stint that actually Stroll was on the back of everyone else pretty quickly, even though he was turned around in turn 1. And Alonso, I feel like on the other side, didn't go with the optimal strategy, similar to Verstappen, but for different reasons, in that Alonso was kind of goal hanging for a safety car, it felt like, particularly in that second, the middle stint, to the point where everyone was like, you probably are going to have to pay at some point, Fernando. So, all right, go on then.
Go on then, if I have to.
Go on then. But yeah, because of what happened at Bahrain last year, and I know they didn't test or practice in the same way they did last year, but I think there was a case of the 2023 Bahrain GP, his podium was fully based on the race coming to him. And it felt like early doors, like maybe he's playing that same game again. Like we know Bahrain's hard on tyres. We saw a lot of drivers locking up early. Maybe Alonso's just waiting this out. And then it soon became apparent, nah, he just doesn't have that pace of the top 4 teams, which is annoying because we'd love to see Alonso in that same fight as the McLaren and Mercedes guys would be really entertaining. And that still might happen. It might just be that this track didn't suit the car. But yeah, it was quite evident early on, I think, that actually, no, this is just Alonso utilising what he's got available, which isn't as much as what was shown in qualifying.
Oh dear.
That's all right. 23 races to go. It's fine, Aston Martin.
You got this.
Shall we have a look at a driver of the day?
Oh yeah, go on then. We'll play the jingle for the first time in 2024. Here we go.
The verdict is in. You're the driver of the day. You're the driver of the day. You're good at driving.
Thank you to the legendary Live Laugh Latifi, as always, for the jingles. Driver of the day. Who've you got, Harry?
Well, Verstappen hard to look past, given the win, but I'm going to give it to Carlos Sainz, because you're right. I think it was a statement drive from Sainz today, and mainly for, I know Leclerc was struggling with his brakes, but he absolutely planted one on him into turn 1, and I enjoyed that a lot. Like, it was from miles back. Those two again.
Terrifying.
It's terrifying to watch, those two.
It's lap 10. What are you doing?
They can't help themselves. When they were like side by side going into like turn 2, which is obviously quite
good.
I was like, come on, you do not hit each other. Race 1, lap 10. But obviously they didn't, so fair enough. But it's like Monza all over again from last year. They're just terrifying to watch. Oh gosh, Oscar Piastri's here. And then,
Oscar.
Good lord. He obviously agrees with my choice. But yeah, no, I'll go for Carlos Sainz.
That's actually the Alpine drivers. They're still looking to finish the race.
Are we going to get to them?
Go on, you can do it. Yeah, I think from Honestly, those Ferrari duo battling, I hadn't even thought to mention that, but that was terrifying. That was proper terrifying because at least with the Monza one, it was really late in the Grand Prix and they were both on a level playing field battling for position. Here, it was really obvious that Sainz had an advantage. And I was just like, for Ferrari's sake, not for the entertainment side, but just let him pass. Just and they didn't. But it was good from a viewer's point of view, at least.
Yeah.
He absolutely was a contender for driver of the day. Shout out to Zhou Guanyu. He did a really good job preserving those tires. He had a lot of work to do. So I respect what he was able to do there. But same as yesterday, I kind of just reluctantly went, Verstappen was very good. And today I'm going to do the same thing. Verstappen was very good. He won by 22 seconds. He had the fastest lap.
Yeah.
It was very good. It was a full Grand Slam, wasn't it? He didn't lose the lead, did he?
No, and to be but they pointed this out when in commentary, but when he did his first stop, like say he went longer than pretty much anyone, and like there's just a shot of him coming out the pit lane, there's no one there. Like he's having a private test session. You're like, oh no. He is so far out in front. Anyway, what a Max.
I'll give it to Verstappen, but Sainz is a very good shout as well. I thought those two were the class of the field. Worst driver of the day.
Get in the bin. Worst driver of the day. Bin. Worst driver of the day. Bin. You suck at driving.
Who are you going for?
I've found this one relatively tricky. Did we ever establish whether Sargent had an issue or he just locked up and then screamed down the radio?
No. It felt more like the latter.
Because I thought initially he'd had like a brake by wire issue and that's why he went straight on. But then watching the replay back, I was like, oh no, I think you've done that yourself, my guy. Yeah. I won't give it to him just on the basis that we don't fully know. And I'll give it to Nico Hülkenberg because you did so well. And then you bottled your start and then you panicked and you punted Lance Stroll. And then that was your day done from there. Nico, mate. I was, many people were singing your praises yesterday. I would have been one of them had I been on the podcast. Because, yeah, again, very impressive in qualifying, but not good in the race. So, sorry, Nico.
Yeah, it was a real tough one because it was his fault, but it wasn't like a blatant.
No, it was clumsy. It was very clumsy,
wasn't it? Yeah, and it was really slow on the inside of that corner because I think Stroll had an adjustment which really slowed him down, and then the same thing happened to Hülkenberg. It was still definitely his fault, but yeah, he ruined his race at lap 1, so it's hard to disagree with it. I'll go with. And my apologies to you, Logan, if it wasn't your fault. I'm going to go with Logan Sargent on the basis that I think it might have been. If it comes out that it wasn't your fault, I will retract and redact everything from the record.
It was just an odd one. You don't often like they might lock up and go wide at that corner, but not just straight on. I don't know.
Yeah,
people just go straight on. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, odd one.
Indeed. And big brain strategy.
Oh, hang on. There we go.
I flummoxed him.
Flummoxed.
What? It's not even raining out. What are you talking about? Yeah, and Bob, if you get a chance, let your teammate pass you. What? He crashed out. He's not even in the race.
What was your big brain strategy?
Look, they had an encouraging day. I'm still going to give it to Ferrari because their radio message is still up there as top tier. I'm going to go for Carlos Sainz, obviously, at the end of the race was on hard tyres. Sergio Perez was on soft tyres. And he goes to his engineer, when do we think the soft tyres might drop off? You know, based on they've seen a whole race worth of evidence on when soft tyres are dropping off. And the engineer just said, I'll get back to you. Thanks for nothing. What is the point? That's
Yeah, the next message was like, oh yeah, now.
We think now. Sure, you just like gone. What, they turned off the radio. And went, what do we tell him? Oh, I don't know. Now? Yeah, good one. It's now, Carlos. Oh dear. Well,
That is a good one. My big brain strat, and this team would be hoping this is the only time they'll get mentioned today, but it's not. Alpine. So Gasly and Ocon essentially matched each other's strategies through the first 2 stints, and then they had a brainwave. I know. We'll keep Ocon out on the hard tyres to end the Grand Prix, and we'll chuck some softs on Gasly just to see what happens. Going two completely different directions on strategy. What happened? They were basically next to each other at the end. It doesn't matter what strategy they do. They are just slow.
Oh, goodness me. I don't remember seeing an Alpine on camera all afternoon. Did they show one?
Ricciardo overtaking Ocon, I think, made it.
That's about it. Oh, good Lord.
So whilst there wasn't a great deal of a fight over first place, there was an epic fight over 12th, which is obviously the position we all want to see scrapped over. Kevin Magnussen on relatively old hard tyres, defending against Yuki Tsunoda, also on hard tyres, and Daniel Ricciardo on some soft tyres. Yuki Tsunoda attempting to pass Kevin Magnussen for a few laps, unable to do so. Suddenly, Daniel Ricciardo's on the scene, and that's where team orders come into play, where the team tell Yuki Tsunoda to get out of the way. He was delighted about it.
Oh.
What do you make of the call?
He was very happy, wasn't he? Give it a go. I'm surprised they didn't swap him back at the end, because why would you not do that?
Yeah.
But yeah, why not? Because you're right. Ricciardo rocks up on the scene with his soft tyres. There's only a certain. I know the soft tyres probably were lasting longer anyway than everyone thought, but they're still going to go off quicker than the hards will. So whilst he's got the life in his tyre, let him do it. That he rocked up and then had to wait behind him for a few laps. So if anything, I would have made that call earlier and just said, Yuki, move, let Ricciardo have a go, and then if not, we'll swap back. Because I think if they had, maybe Ricciardo could have got past Magnussen and then left Yuki to it towards the end of the race. But I'm not mad at it. I know it's first race of the season, but you know, Zhou was only just up the road, and say something happens to anyone in the top 10, there's a point on the board there. So it's worth it. It was worth it to me. I know I can understand why Yuki's annoyed at it, but I think it was worth a punt, given the team championship, that the net result was exactly the same in the end. So
yeah, I don't know this for sure, but Albon wasn't that far behind in 15th, so I don't know if there was a case of switching the drivers at the end would have been too risky in that regard. It's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, you would expect them to switch them back. I was surprised that didn't happen. I understand the call because I understand Tsunoda's frustration. Tsunoda's frustration can easily be explained. Firstly, because he's a racing driver and doesn't like to be told to get out of the way for his teammate. That's obvious. But also, Tsunoda throughout this weekend has pretty much been quicker than Ricciardo every step of the way. I don't remember really any points this weekend where Ricciardo was the quicker driver. Tsunoda out-qualified him fairly comfortably. In the race, Tsunoda was the one battling over sort of P11, P12 or so, whereas Ricciardo had to really fight to get back into the mix. As mentioned, he had to overtake an Alpine. So I feel like Tsunoda, with a few laps to go in the Grand Prix, he's done everything right almost throughout the entire weekend. And then to be told, let your teammate through, I can understand that frustration. I think it probably was worth a go. But goodness me, they really fumbled it, didn't they? Because by the time Ricciardo got past, he was 2 seconds behind Magnussen. You need to keep your DRS. Like that's the key. So whilst he was able to pick it back up, by then it was a little bit too late. And look, I don't know. Tsunoda was threatening. I feel like he'd had enough opportunities to then give Ricciardo a go, but I don't think Ricciardo was really any faster. You might as well try it, obviously, but I don't think the two drivers were actually that dissimilar in terms of pace at that stage of the Grand Prix, in which case, unless Albon was too close behind, you switch them back. I don't have the gap for Albon to Tsunoda at the end of the race, but yeah, it felt like that would have been the obvious thing to do.
I've just opened my Twitter, so there's an addition to this story.
Is this where Tsunoda's dived up the inside of Ricciardo?
On the cool-down lap.
Yeah.
Apparently he's dive bombed him in turn 8 on the cool-down lap, and they've almost crashed. And Ricciardo's response was, and I won't actually, so I'm just using the actual bleep button we have. He said, "What the? I'll save it. He's a ing helmet." So that's good. Good team harmony.
Race 1. Great.
That's gone really well. Well done, everyone. Well done, Minabe.
What Tsunoda should have done is just bash into the side of Ricciardo's car, because that works really well for drivers, doesn't it, Santino Ferrucci?
Ooh. Ooh, okay.
Ooh, old school F2 reference there.
Oh, nice.
But yeah. Yeah, that was it's an interesting part of the story as well. Yeah, I didn't have these two teammates as the ones that would be at odds with one another after race 1, but here we are. In terms of the actual performance of the team, obviously the battle was over P12, so even if they did get it done, no points were on offer. They finished 13th and 14th. Felt like there was a bit more hype about them going into the season.
I mean, Zach Brown his blood pressure's gone down finally, because they're not the same pace as a McLaren. Yeah, I don't know. I felt like Ricciardo before the weekend was kind of trying to temper expectations of it. Didn't help that he went fastest in FP1, was it? Well, one of the practice sessions.
Yeah.
Obviously that was just different tyres, etc., etc. But yeah, I think everyone thought maybe a bit more of that team for it. I guess it didn't turn out to be as much of a Red Bull or RB19 clone as everyone feared. And I guess that's shown, because it's not driven like an RB19. So yeah, I don't know whether they'll be disappointed or if there's more to come from that car. Maybe there is. And again, towards the end of the race, they were a bit punchier than they seemed to be than at the start. So yeah, I get a jury still out on that one, but I don't think they will be that pleased with how their race went, how the weekend went.
Yeah, underwhelming, right? Even though Ricciardo said before the season he'd like to be fighting for top 5 finishes, even if you say, okay, that's a bit of a dream in the distance, you would have they would have liked to have competed for the lower end of the points, you think. And I know there was no retirements in this Grand Prix, so there weren't many opportunities that opened up in that regard, but I think this confirmed that they are quite comfortably away from the top 5 for now. So yeah, what about the car they were battling, Kevin Magnussen? Because at least from my side, I feel like Haas have got something to work with.
Yeah, I almost can't believe it. And again, we couldn't see what Hülkenberg could actually do with that qualifying result, because he was an idiot on lap 1. But K-Mag he finished higher than he started. In a Haas.
3 positions higher.
Good Lord. Yeah, that is progress. So, look, again, I'm like going to see what happens in the next few races, because again, Magnussen, got P5 at Bahrain 2022. So, and it's never been any better since that point. And obviously this isn't the same, but I would just, again, temper expectations just to see whether that will continue. But on the face of it, Haas nowhere near as bad as I think even they fitted. I think they were maybe pleasantly surprised about how well that went this weekend. And maybe there were, with Hülkenberg, maybe there were a couple of points on the board that they lost out on, which will be a shame for them if that makes a big difference towards the end of the year. But certainly in terms of, maybe they have finally understood the tyres. Well done, Haas.
This is going to sound crazy, but outside of Red Bull, I think Haas should be the second happiest team coming out of this race weekend because Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, Aston Martin, all four of those teams would have liked to have been closer to Red Bull. Minardi, as mentioned, they're a little bit underwhelming versus what we thought might be possible for them. Williams didn't offer a great deal. Alpine are being demoted to Formula 3, I've heard. And Haas, they seem to have somewhat answered the issue. They were still struggling a little bit. Kevin Magnussen was dropping off some drivers ahead at various points in this race, but it wasn't enough to be overtaken. And that's the crucial thing, right? He might have had his mirrors full of drivers for a long part of that Grand Prix, but at a circuit where it is relatively straightforward to make overtakes, he wasn't being overtaken. He did gain 3 positions versus where he started. That is something to work with. And from Nico Hülkenberg's perspective, we're talking here about the driver that qualified 15th, not the driver that qualified 10th, who ruined his race on the first lap. And who knows, Nico Hülkenberg, he probably would have fancied himself to finish 11th. I don't know if he'd have stayed ahead of Lance Stroll, maybe, but I think they'd have been best of the rest outside of that if Nico Hülkenberg had, kept his front wing clean during that first lap. I think this is an encouraging race. And from Nico Hülkenberg's perspective, I know he was completely out of kilter because of what happened, but given the fact he had to pit at the end of lap 1 and obviously a slow stop, so strategy-wise, he's not on anywhere near an optimal strategy. He still beat both Alpines, which might say more about the Alpines than it does about Hülkenberg. But it's still pretty good, right?
That's fair. It's a fair point. This is entirely unrelated. We're going back to Logan Sargent. I don't know, because Albon had issues with his dash as well. Just seen a video.
Yes.
When he's braking for that corner that has the brake bias on there, and it goes from 57. As he hits the brakes, it shoots up to 93. Unless, again, he set that himself. But that's all the front brake bias. Why has it done that? Anyway, that's finding excuses for my man Logan now. But
No, go ahead. Fair play. I said a lot about Alpine on yesterday's qualifying review, so I'm just going to sit back whilst I let you talk about them here. They finished 17th and 18th.
What are you doing, Alpine?
Not a lot. That's the answer.
Not a lot. Look, we sometimes get accused for British bias. I'm these days. I'm unsure whether people just say it because it's like an ongoing joke or they genuinely mean it. But we like to think we're not biased towards any team. We're fairly neutral. We just love the sport. But this is karma, Alpine. Next time, paint your damn car. And this is what you get. This is all karma coming back to you. No, that is a mess. And again, we could have been sat here this time last year and said exactly the same thing about McLaren, which I'm sure we did. But at least with McLaren, their house was in order, and it was just a really bad start to the year. This, given the state of where Alpine are, it's an absolute tractor of a car. It's overweight. It's underpowered. Can't do traction. It can't do anything. That's a mess. And that's going to take a long. It's going to take a long time to sort out. And if you Ocon and Gasly, Ocon obviously his million-year contract's finally coming up for renewal. But where else does he go? So is he going to have to stick to this? And Gasly, who I know has only done 1 year and one race now, but he must be looking at least his ex-team and going, well, at least they were in some sort of fight. This is terrible. I don't know. I know it's race 1 and things can change very quickly, and they do have a lot of resource, Alpine. They have the might of Renault behind them, but this is it just feels like a hopeless case, this car, already. And they were so far behind that it's, at least with McLaren last year, they had a terrible test. The DNF for Piastri was mechanical, and they didn't have the track time for that car. Alpine had 3 days testing. They're not at a terrible test. They're just slow, and it's slow at everything. And as you said, Ben, they went on complete different strategies and still ended up next to each other because called slow. Yeah, it's a real worry for them. And you obviously someone's got to come last or be slow, but that's not a good look for F1, for Alpine, for Renault, effectively, to one of your manufacturer teams to be that bad, especially after all we had over the winter break with Andretti, etc., which we're not going to get into now. But it's not a good look. You shouldn't have that amount of resource behind you and be that slow. And again, it's probably down to the mess that has been happening in the team. But yeah, you do wonder, like, if Otmar Safnauer was still there, was this down to him? Is this part of the 100 race plan? But I don't know. I don't know whether, even if it is, I think it goes much further up than that. Yeah, I know it's funny, and it's funny for us to make the joke. They're the butt of the joke at the moment, but I don't want them to be that bad. It's not good for us. It's not good for F1. So I hope they turn it around. And I know you mentioned this in the quality review, Ben, but I guess there's solace in that. I know they were last, or basically last yesterday. No, they were last. They qualified last? Last row of the grid? Yeah.
Yep, 19th, 20th.
But at least it was only a second. A second away from the pace at the time. And I know it changes as you go through qualifying, but they're not like it. They're not like they're 3 seconds off the pace. So hopefully things can change there. But yeah, good Lord. Not good.
Oh, no. Okay, if you were listening to our preview of the Bahrain race, you would have heard the first Discord submissions of the year, where we ask for who's under pressure going into the weekend. But we also do Discord submissions as on the race reviews as well, where we ask what was the moment of the race. Before we get to those, we'll give our own. Harry, what was your moment of the race?
My moment of the race, I'm just referring back to... all of mine have been very Ferrari related, but we've already mentioned this. It's Charles Leclerc just not staying on track, because I really enjoyed it. It's just not bothering with turn 10. Some of the other turns, just driving the car as if it was a shopping trolley, because apparently it was in that first half of the race. They're not doing turn. There was so many replays of that. I thought it was the same one, but it's not. It's just him doing it over and over again. So I enjoyed that. It wasn't a lot of moments to pick from this race, but I'm going for that one.
They made a goddamn montage of turn 10. Usually, like mid-race, they were like, here's all the times that he's gone off and locked up on that corner. I don't think I've ever seen a full montage of mess-ups from the same corner. So that was definitely up there. I'm just going to go with a nice and simple one. A first We Are Checking of the year. Love to hear it.
Nice. Yeah. Because it was... why is my car pulling to the right every time I brake? We are checking. We're good.
Say the line, Bart.
Say the straight away. Got straight in there. Oh, dear.
Okay, well, that's our moments of the race, but... who can we hear from in our Discord?
So many people, so many that we can't get through all of them, sadly. But it's good to be back. I've missed the Discord submissions. First up is Skylar with 3 seconds worth, which is, to be honest, that's fairly long for Skylar. So here we go.
Wow.
Hamilton's broken seat.
Good.
Forgot that Hamilton's broken seat. Yeah.
Also, why did Lewis Hamilton sound like he was doing every radio message from a submarine? His quality of his messages were absolutely shocking.
He compromised the quality of the radio message because he was too busy trying to work out how batteries work. It's like, there's none left. Yeah, you've used it all, mate.
I've got 1% left. Stop pressing the button then, mate.
Exactly.
Oh, dear. Okay, cool. Thanks, Scarlett. Next up is Alex C. 458.
Hey guys, great race. Not really though. It was fine. My moment of the race, it's gonna have to be the Dutch national anthem. Nothing like tradition, you know. Can't wait to hear that tune 24 times this year. Let's go.
Let's go. Oh dear. Thanks for that, Alex. Next up is Bristol Liam.
Right, lads. Moment of the dull Bahrain Grand Prix was Chock Up the Lockup doing his lockups. Cheers.
Chalk up the lockups.
I like that. That's strong.
Good lord. That's strong. Chuck up the lockups. Oh, better than Bahrain LeBahrain. Thank you, Liam. Oh, this is going to be a struggle. Right. This next one, and this is their name. Okay? On the Discord.
God's sake.
This is from
Can't
Late
do it.
Late Master Breaking. Okay? I'm not saying that again. Here we go.
Good to be back, lads. My moment of the race was Jeremy Clarkson being absolutely wasted on the grid walk. And that's about it.
He was. Hello, Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Cheers, Jazza. Cheers, Jazza. It's funny because he posted something on his Instagram 2 hours before of like this massive bottle of rosé. So I'm assuming that's what it was. Anyway, next up we have Cade 1989, and now I'm to. Oh, here we go. Found him. Cade 1989.
I like
Found her. So sorry. Cade, start again.
when Yuki was on the radio saying Daniel's not fast at all. He's so right for that one.
Okay. Savage.
So right for that one.
So right for that. Next up is a Big Ham. Where are you, a Big Ham? There we go.
A Big Ham is back, baby. With our moment of the race was the Ferrari boys, Cockles Lockup versus Smooth Operator, fighting it out at the beginning of the race. Signs showing Freddie Vass who he should have kept for 2025. Love ya. Bye.
Ooh, like that. Also, I am very confident that this is the only podcast, not just F1, the only podcast where you'd get the line, "A Big Ham is back, baby."
A Big Ham is back, baby. We are a strange podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, we really are.
Thank you, a big Ham. Finally, or last but not least, is Right Guy.
Hey guys, Frog Guy. Hope everybody had a good off season. I got the tattoo. I'll be posting it later on.
Oh my god!
In the next couple days. My moment of the race is the back and forth chirping between Danny Rick and Yuki, where Danny Rick's like, "I don't need to say anything," and they let him pass, and Yuki's able to keep up with him, and Yuki's like, "This guy's not even fast." Like, it's gonna be fun to see over the course of the season. But that's my moment of the race. Love what you guys do. Keep on breaking late and join the Patreon. Literally, the most expensive Hall of Fame tier is like $12 a month US, and it's totally worth it. Love you guys. Bye.
Doing God's work, Right Guy. Thank you.
Lovely round of submissions. Thank you to everyone who submitted. As you've already said, Harry, there were plenty more, and we can only get through some of them. So just keep submitting, and we'll play as many as we can on previews and reviews. Plenty of opportunities, given that we have got 92 races this season.